Hello, Money Queens and listeners. Welcome to Women Behind the Millions. Let's meet the women behind the millionaires, the women supporting, guiding, celebrating women with their wealth. You will hear from women millionaires, how they got there, what they wish they had known, what got them to be a millionaire, the emotional side, the spiritual side, the practical side of wealth. You'll also get to meet the women behind the scenes helping make it happen. Let's dive into Women Behind the Millions. I am Jessica Weaver, your host, best-selling author of 3 books, wealth advisor, and founder of the Women's Wealth Boutique. Let's start meeting the women. Hello, Money Queens. I am your host, Jessica Weaver of Women Behind the Millions. And today, another juicy topic, all about women leaders, women building out teams, hiring, firing, yes, the good, the bad, the ugly. Today we have with us Jordan Christa. She began recruiting solely within the wealth management industry in 2017, working closely with founders, managing principals, and partners of RIAs across the nation. She quickly recognized the lack of bandwidth her clients have to dedicate recruiting, interviewing, hiring, the entire process. Following her passion to impact the lives of others, Jordan founded Recruiting Industry-Specific Experts, or RISE, with the vision to become much more than simply a staffing resource. In just a few short years, Jordan is incredibly grateful to have worked with over 100 firms nationwide. This is amazing to see, and is committed to giving back to the industry that's given her so much as a partner of multiple FPA chapters and universities across the nation. So thank you so much, Jordan, for being on our show today. I cannot wait to dive into our topic as well. So.
Thank you just for having me. I appreciate it. I'm so excited. Obviously, women in wealth management is a huge passion of mine. So anywhere that I can help and kind of talk about certain things, because what I do, I see things every day that I'm like, oh man, how can I get the word out to do it right or to do it better, to be more intentional? So I'm excited to have the opportunity to specifically talk about what we're going to dive deep into as well.
Ooh, when you meet with a new firm, can you immediately see the gaps that they have? Or maybe it's just how that principal or leading advisor partner, they're talking about their issues and you're like, oh, this key person or shuffling their responsibilities around could change everything?
Yeah, so it's pretty quick to tell. So we do a lot of vetting. So I should kind of first mention, we have a core value, our personal core values. One of the fundamental pillar of our core values is that we don't work with any clients, so firms that we wouldn't personally work for, and we don't work with any candidates that we wouldn't personally want to work with. Okay. So we do a very thorough vetting, not only on the candidate side, but the client side. So yes, to your point, I think what's interesting is after you talk to so many firms that are having similar issues, you can pick up and kind of pinpoint on where the actual gap or sometimes it's an overlap where they don't have structure in place. And so there's too many cooks in the kitchen, even with a boutique firm, if you will. So there's not specific processes in place. So there's kind of just people stepping on toes. And unfortunately, things can be missed that way because you assume somebody else is doing them. So yes, to your point, I can tell pretty quickly because some of the primary key issues that firms have, especially when they're in growth mode, which is 100% of the firms we work with, it's like, okay, we can kind of pinpoint to what that is and ask the right questions to understand better. But there's definitely repetition and issues that we see.
Ooh, repetition and issues, I'm sure. So a lot of inefficiencies, and we're in the business. I'm a financial advisor, wealth advisor. We're in the business to get rid of the inefficiencies, to make our clients' money extremely efficient and maximizing every opportunity out there. Yet when it comes to our own practice, there's a lot of lags.
Yep. What you just said is so often what I find with, especially because we work with boutique firms too. So it's so interesting because I always say business owners and entrepreneurs, we like to be in the business. We don't like to work on the business. Working on the business doesn't fulfill us. It doesn't create relationships. It doesn't make us money. It doesn't grow. Well, that's our prerogative, right? Whether that's true or not. There's a little bit, I think, yes and no, just depending on what you have in place. But because of that, yeah, a lot of issues they happen internally. And it's not because we don't care, but it's because we're too busy caring about our clients instead of our internal team and our internal growth and what that looks like.
Yes. I often see financial advisors own financial houses are a mess. It's like we're too busy taking care of everybody else's
Exactly.
and things. So it's more an advisor wearing the advisory hat versus the CEO. Let's run our business. And I'll admit too, right, when you're in growth mode, and we've definitely been in growth mode at the Women's Wealth Boutique, it's also hard to carve out that strategic time, planning time, to
Right.
step out. It's almost like you're in growth mode, but it feels very similar to survival mode. We just kind of keep going and get by and get by and get by day by day. So do you help advisors kind of step back out of the day-to-day, kind of that to-do list?
Yeah. So actually, the first hire that I recommend is an operations hire, because what I found is, to your point, we tend to let the other things go because we're so busy, and it's even more true with women. Women naturally are multitaskers. We wear a lot of hats. We pride ourselves to wear the badge of honor that we do it so well. So what happens when we're firm owners is we're constantly in the business. We're doing so many things. And it's at the end of the day, if we have to do something that is going to really fulfill us and has to do with clients, or something that's going to get us out of the business, we're always going to gravitate to the first versus the latter. And so that's what we do. Yes. So we actually have a couple of different divisions. So we are traditionally an executive search firm. The reason I say executive search, even though we do have a contingency-based arm, is because the way we identify candidates is more of a headhunting approach. So we don't do active search boards. We're not looking for people that are actively looking, not unemployed. So all of the individuals that we work with are gainfully employed, but they're having something happen internally, whether it's leadership or changes, or especially right now there's always a lot of transitions happening, I think, within wealth management. But we're seeing a lot more acquisitions right now. And so there's been a lot of, especially with the Schwab and TD Ameritrade. So there's been a lot of movement. So we move individuals who are looking for their forever career home because of a specific situation going on internally. So we have a retained division as well. That actually is brand new this year. We just started doing retained search. Yeah, because the sense of urgency and the capacity that we had. And then we do a whole nother division, which is what I run independently, because I have a team on the executive search side. And then when you look at our practice management side, that's 100% me. So I go out, I meet with firms, I spend anywhere up to a week at different locations across the nation, getting to understand the firm, their issues, and really helping them, identify the gaps, identify the overlap, identify if there's a culture issue, what their core values are. So I walk them through the process of what I call firm discovery. So, we're going to talk a lot in this podcast specifically about job discovery, but firm discovery is really kind of the first step in it to really identifying who you are, what is your brand, and what is your identity as a firm. And again, as women, we're so busy sometimes, and we get thrown into things. So we either step away from that, or we're not intentional when we first start out, or as things change, we don't change our identity as a firm. And that from the very top, it trickles all the way down to everybody that you hire, and all of the core values of your employees, and what their thoughts are about the identity of the firm.
Yes. Oh, I'm sure there's an identity crisis on the end. And women, we're always changing and evolving too. So it makes sense to do that at a regular pace.
Right.
As your business is growing, evolving, you're growing and evolving as well. But Jordan, let's go back in time. What brought you into this space? Did you always work as a recruiter, or at staffing companies, firms? Where did you start your career?
Yeah. So my background's actually, it's kind of funny because I don't know that I actually found the industry found me. So I actually, if you rewind, I was actually in retail growing up. I worked in retail sales. So in high school, I started off and kind of grew into college. I was an assistant manager of, I don't know if anybody remembers Delia's. They were based in New York.
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
It was a catalog for a long time. Then they put a store in. So kind of grew with that company for quite a bit, had my first child, and took a step back and was looking for something to do full time where I could be hands-on with him, but also have a career. I'm very career oriented. I've always been that way. So I actually was sales director of Mary Kay for quite some time. So that's something that's not anywhere, just because I feel like it's very relevant to my story, because I think it's what helps me understand business and kind of grow that way, because I was on the leadership side of the business. But I also always I needed more. I'm always that person that's like, but this is so great and I love it so much, but I need more. Give me more. And so I was actually out and about and ran into a producing agent with State Farm.
Okay.
He was looking to build his team. He's like, hey, I know that you're not looking, but if you want to just, come on board, I'm looking for a licensed PNC and life and health producer. And I was like, well, I don't have those licenses. And he said, it's super easy. You'll get trained. I'll pay for all the education. So that's what I did alongside of Mary Kay. And I hated it so much. So hats off to anybody who is doing insurance. It was just, obviously PNC is very different as well. So it was very difficult. I was calling people when they were eating at their homes at dinner. This is before cell phones became.
Oh, yes.
My marriage
calling days.
Exactly. And so I actually reached out to a friend of mine that I'd gone to school and college with, high school and college, and she was looking for an HR specialist. And I thought, well, I am the life and health guru of the office. That sounds great. So I went in to meet with her for an HR position. And she told me, Jordan, you would hate me if I put you in HR. It's so procedures, regulations, not people driven enough for you. And I said, well, in your professional opinion as a recruiter, what should I do? And she was like, you should become a recruiter. And I said, well, are you hiring? And she goes, well, I don't know. And I said, well, then I should work with you. And that's how I got in the industry.
Just create your own job. That shows how good she is. Like
I think that this is where I should be. And so I was thrown into accounting and finance recruiting at the beginning. I had no idea that firms like this even existed. It was kind of mind blowing. And then I quickly understood why. And because of all the time it takes to find the right person. So I worked with a firm here in Houston that was boutique. We only worked with small privately held firms in Houston, but we did specialize in an industry. It was all kinds of, from commercial real estate, oil and gas, to, it was just everything, right? So we had CPAs. So we worked to fill any type of CPA, accounting, finance role. And then I did some HR and administrative staffing as well, but it was all with boutique firms. And I think that that's actually why I fell in love with wealth management, because it's relationship driven, not transactionally driven. So being based in Houston and only working with firms in Houston, I saw a couple of downturns with oil and gas. And at that time, I was the assistant corporate manager with the firm that I'd started with and grown into that position. And it was kind of pushing to, hey, let's go nationwide. Let's do something different. We're in the middle of a downturn. We need to pivot. And so that was my issue. I was having a really big problem and struggling with having a voice with leadership. And so I was recruited out to an executive search firm, and they needed someone to build out a wealth management division. And I said, I don't know anything about wealth management except for the fact that Fidelity wastes a lot of paper. That's the only thing I knew. And I had a 401k. So decided that it was a perfect time for me. It was a risk though, because I was a succession plan for the firm I was with. And so I said, I'm more than happy to do this. I'm really excited about it. I've done my research. I think I can do this. I said, but not signing anything, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, we're going to shake hands and I'm going to do my own thing. And I'm going to take all of my clients with me. And he was like, oh, that's never happened. Everybody loves it here. And it's great. It's just a very, again, kind of when you read my bio, what I really found and still find very fulfilling for me is to get to know firms from the inside, to really genuinely understand how you tick. Because if I don't understand that, I'm not going to be able to help you grow from the talent that I'm identifying, because I don't truly understand. And that's just not the mindset that firm has. And so they're not open to doing things in that deep, that level. I'd rather have 5 firms that I work with that I just have amazing relationships with, because I love to work with them, than 105. And so that's when I was there for a year. And I also opened a commercial banking division, and it was doing very well. It's more transactional. And I was kind of given the opportunity, and he said, okay, well, I think we're going to hire somebody else for wealth management. Your talents are so well suited for commercial banking. And that's when I shook hands and said, thank you, but no thanks. I love what I do, and I'm not giving away my clients. They're my friends at this point. I'm not doing it.
Family.
Yes, family. I cared so much about, and I care so much about the success and growth of my firm. So at that point is when I shook hands and amicably took a step back and walked away. And that was October, almost 5 years ago, and started my own firm. So that brings me to today.
I always love hearing how all the different experiences from the different companies, even roles, just brought you to exactly where you are. It always comes like full alignment. It's just, we don't know where we're going, hopping all over the place. That's amazing. One of our advisors was a Mary Kay salesperson, and right, that introduction into the sales world for women, I think it really shows right away whether this is, I love sales, I love building those relationships, or this is not me.
Right.
Get thrown into that and you can see very quickly which role you want to be in. And especially for you, when you take so much time to build out those relationships, I'm sure it doesn't feel like sales.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
One of the things that it taught me, and you'll have to ask the advisor that you just mentioned, but one of the biggest takeaways I've had from Mary Kay, and I think, and I still to this day, and even preparing for this podcast, I wrote it in my notes, is one of Mary Kay Ash's primary things that she always said is that, because women are emotional, let's just throw it out there. We hate it, but it's true. We have our reasons and it is what it is, but it's reality. It's fact. So it's understanding how to control that EQ as you go through certain trials and tribulations, because when your EQ goes up, your IQ goes down. And I remember that one of the biggest things that was my takeaway is she always said, whenever you're working your business, work it with the heart of a woman, but the mind of a man. And I love that so much, because sometimes I have to take a step back and say, is this a decision that I'm making based out of my emotions or based out of the logic? Is this the logical solution or an emotional solution?
Yes, that's true. The emotions getting the best of me. I mean, we see that all the time when it comes to our money, and we just like lead with our hearts,
right?
In so many different ways. And I think it's also tricky figuring out the emotions versus intuition and leading with your heart,
right,
as well. And understanding, I've done a lot, not a lot, but I've done a good amount in human design. Have you done human design, Jordan?
I have not. No.
Oh, okay. So I learned that I am an emotional wave. So I go up and I come down, and my energy is a pulse. So it explains why there are times when I'm like, I'm all in, I will work nonstop, I have all this energy, I'm excited, I'm ambitious. And then it's almost like this hangover when my emotions are low and my energetic pulse is off. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. I feel fully drained. There's like emotionally drained, nothing left. So knowing that, I know when I should make decisions and when I should hold off on making a decision. And I feel like that's what you're talking about too. Is like, am I making this an impulsive, emotional decision, or did I actually sit with this? It feels right in my gut. It feels right. It's a logical next step. It's mentally, I'm there. And that, for me, that was a huge change in how I operate and even how I pace myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like you just described me to the T.
So there you go. Now you understand.
Very similar to that. I call it the work burnout. So I'm either like, I'm all or nothing. I feel like I'm like, go, 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 go. Or I'm like, I'm going to need a minute. I'm literally not moving from this couch. I just need to like have a moment to recharge. So I feel like
I'm curious, Jordan, because your children are older than mine, because I feel like when I'm at that point, and sometimes I even try to go in like the living room, I'm just lying on the couch and they're like, Mommy, play with me.
Yeah.
I'm even a 3-year-old. And I'm like, and then the mom guilt comes in. How have you been able to deal with that?
Yeah. So it's really been fun to see. I know it has. It's been fun to see. So my son actually works for me.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So my oldest, I should say, he's 17. So I think that's a big play for everybody who's listening and thinking, oh, well, how old is he? So he's 17. He doesn't work for me full time. It's kind of more of a part-time when he can. He plays tennis. He's on varsity tennis in high school. He's very busy, but he does. And I think it's just been really cool to, when they get to a certain point, to really have them help you. And then it gives them a place to play that is also allowing you to be in work mode. And then when you have a moment or you need a moment, by saying, you know what, I need that, but can you help me with that? You were such a great helper that one time. Can you help me again while I do this? Or I have just a moment to myself. But they are older, and my youngest is 13. And that was really crucial to me when I was in Mary Kay and in sales and even in recruiting, because I didn't stop Mary Kay until I started my own business. It was like 6 months after I started my own business that I was like, I can't do this, because I was holding training meetings 4 days, 5 days a week. And so I was extremely career driven. I've always been extremely career driven. And it's been really fun to see now that my kids are older, how they understand and they have an appreciation for business owners and they have an appreciation for hard work. And I think that when you are looking at children as young as yours, it can be difficult, and I'm engaged, and my soon-to-be stepdaughter is 3, and my fiance, and my fiance is an entrepreneur too, and so it's definitely, I see it firsthand too with him with dad guilt, right? It's kind of the same thing, and I think that the biggest thing is I think it's hard at the time, but it's so crucial now that my kids are older to see that teaching them that you do have to, work hard for the things that you have. They just appreciate it a lot more. And even though it's hard in the moment, they'll forget. And the things that they're going to remember is seeing how hard you work to get to where you are. And it's going to really help them understand when they get their first job, how to work hard. And that's one of the biggest things we see right now, right? It's kind of like, we'll just call it the wave of hires that are happening, or the wave of graduates that are happening. We're in a weird time in terms of entitlement or hardworking. And, how do you differentiate somebody who is just like, hey, I graduated, I'm trying to find the most money, or somebody who's a hard worker. And so all of those things are so important, I think, to entrepreneurs that have young children and as they grow.
Yes. That was a pep talk I guess I needed. Right, Jordan. You're right. Is your daughter getting more interested and intrigued by what you do? Ask questions. Yeah.
So my son has a funny way of doing it because he works for me. But he's like, I'm like, so one day, like, obviously I want you to be the succession plan. He's like, why would I recruit advisors when I can become one? Like, so that's his mentality. So that's interesting.
Very interesting.
But that's the personality he has. He's like, you want me to do this? So I'm going to do this and do.
I'm going to challenge it.
Yeah. And my daughter, actually, she wants nothing to do with it. And not that she doesn't appreciate it. She's just like, yeah, that's cool. I want to be a veterinarian, so it's kind of
very different hat. Yes.
Different. She is very hardworking. And so it's instilled a lot with her just because she sees me working late nights. And that's the biggest thing is, so when she has homework, she's like, well, I've got to get it done. She plays tennis and basketball too. So she's very busy as well. And it's never been an excuse for like, oh, I had a basketball game, I'll do my homework later. It's been like, well, I got to get it done, because she sees me 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. I mean, you know how it is, especially as, like you're saying, it's hard to differentiate it. Am I thriving or am I surviving? Like, where am I at in my business? And I think when you are in the midst of birthing a baby business, it's kind of like birthing an infant, where you're up all night and you don't get a lot of sleep and you're functioning off of caffeine. And so she's seen me, both my kids have seen me put in that work. And so it really has trickled into their academia and their personality.
That's amazing. That's amazing to see. My daughter asked me the other day, she goes, Mommy, I make my bed and clean my room every day. Will you give me $5 a day or a week? And I'm like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. So how about this? If you don't do that, I take $5 from you.
Yeah. No, I think that's great.
Oh, you're okay.
No, I think that's
I think it's just interesting, how their mind works. And you're right. Yeah. The money driven versus the ambition, and knowing the fruits of your labor eventually are going to pay off.
They do. And what's so funny is I remember when my son was probably my daughter's age, and he was kind of saying the same thing. Like, he wanted to start getting an allowance to be able to do things and go to the mall and hang out with friends, because, junior high going into high school. And I was like, no, you're not getting money for chore. Like, it's not how we do things. That's just like, that's the expectation. So I actually went through a summer where he would read books and I'd make him do reports. And for every report he did, I'd give him $10.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's the ways of the household. Everybody has a part to play.
I had him read things like Eat That Frog. So he was reading like, professional development books by John Maxwell. And so it's been fun to kind of see that part of it. But definitely as moms that's the biggest difference too, is a lot of women, I think, shy away from even being business owners or advisors because they don't feel that they will be given the opportunity to have a work-life balance, to have their career and have their children. And I think that that's an aspect that is always my goal to share when I do like a lot of these career days at colleges across the nation is you can have the best of both worlds. You can. It's just understanding the different positions within wealth management that you can have and what that looks like in the right firm for you. Because I think that that's one of the biggest reasons that women shy away from the industry too, is in their mind, advisors are, they're not going door to door, and, they're doing it old school, and they don't want to do that. And they don't want to work all hours, kind of like tax season, so that's a mentality I'm trying to have shift with.
Okay.
With
it needs to shift. You're right. You can really, as an advisor, build whatever kind of practice you want it to be. It can be small. It can be, medium, huge. And it can change too.
Right.
It can be small while your kids are young and you want to be able to be there every night at home. And then when they're older, more independent, you can shift gears and go into hustle mode again. But I love that there's no right or wrong shape or size of an advisory firm. It's really coming down to where your priorities are, where you want to leave them. And you're right. We need to get that message out to more women. Mm-hmm. So we know why you got into recruiting, your backstory. What, Jordan, do you think are some of the errors firms make, advisors make when they are hiring and building out their teams?
Yeah. So I think it goes back to kind of what you and I talked a little bit about firm discovery. So when it comes to team building and management, it starts before a hire is even made. It starts with when you identify that you need help. It starts with job discovery, firm discovery, job discovery. So there's a couple of key things that I'm going to touch on, and I actually have a couple of areas on my website that walk you through this. And so I thought that was really cool. But so I think that the first thing is that traditionally women, I mean, all firm owners do this. So it's not just us as women, but women I had seen are worse at it, at putting off hiring because we're too busy.
I can attest to that.
And we're too busy. And then also it's like, we know what goes into it. And so it's not only a logical decision, but it is an emotional decision. And
the fear-based decision too. What if I hire wrong? What if it's going to take more time to get them going? And I hear a lot, the financial side of it too. Now there's a real commitment.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of reasons why we put it off. And I think the other one is that we just tend to do it ourselves, right? So, and that's also a reason that we don't necessarily make them the best managers, but we'll go to that in a minute. So when it comes to team building, I always say, you have to be very intentional, but start with your firm discovery. What are your core values? Mm-hmm. What's your specialty? What's your niche? What's your clientele? What's your mission? What's your vision? What are your goals? And so to really, and I know that sounds a little bit like, man, that's over here, and we're talking about hiring. But if you don't know what those are, you're not going to know the actual candidate intangible or tangibles you're looking for, because you really have to look at it as an overview. So what I found is the worst hires that are made out of desperation, and they're made quickly. And not every quick hire is the wrong one. But if it's not an intentional hire, then even if it's great for the first 2 or 3 years, as your company grows, but that person has a different growth trajectory in mind, it's not going to align. So there's a lot of, so team building starts with firm discovery and then moves into job discovery. So once you know who you are as a firm, where you want to go, what your growth looks like, then you can understand, well, what do I want this person to play? How do I want them to play long term, short term, where they're at, where they're coming at? And then, okay, well, if that's the case, what requirements am I asking of them? What designations do I want them to have? What experience, what tenure, what background? And so in order to really understand the need that you're looking to hire, you have to understand your firm and where you're going. Obviously, things change, but it's better to be more intentional about your hiring. Never hire out of desperation.
So that's short-term focus versus the long-term focus. And
exactly.
Backing into it. It makes sense. You have it building out a plan first. Mm-hmm. And understanding, because I see also a lot, right? Did I hire the wrong person, or did I set that person up kind of for failure because we didn't do the back work, have the right welcome, the right training, the right setup, communication, and things like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
All these things.
The backward first.
Right. All these things take us out of our business. So we're like, we put it off and we put it off and we put it off. So then we just hire somebody because they were referred to us and they came from this person. So like, they've got to be great, but they may be a superstar. So that's the other thing, is that not all superstars are great for your organization. They can become cancerous depending on their background, like why they were a superstar with this firm, or, so there's not, I always say there's a specific firm, there's a specific role for everybody. It doesn't make them a bad hire if they're not the one for you. It just means that they're not the right hire long-term for your growth. So before you even think about putting together a job description, think about putting together your firm description and really having a firm identity be the fundamental part of your strategic growth path of creating the job description, then creating candidate intangibles. So we call that firm discovery. And then on the website, it's under our expertise. It's our proven process. And it says right there is the first thing is job discovery. And so it walks you through the steps of doing that. But then once you have that, you can identify your need. Define the role, responsibilities. You can figure out, what you're looking for, intangibles and tangibles. And I will say, especially firms that are growing and they're small, intangibles are more important than tangibles 99% of the time. So it's so crucial, to not only understand what that looks like, but then we do recommend, and this is something we do for our retained clients and for the clients that we work with business management, is we create interview questionnaires that are customized for every role, but it's kind of to what you're looking for out of that candidate. So when we think about hiring, I think that's the other thing is who is an advisor who owns a firm, who also is just an excellent interviewer because of all the interviews that they've done. So what do? You just Google interview questions, Brent, and now you're asking things that are, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And tell me a little bit about your experience, instead of questions that are like, what do you think is your strength? Why did you choose the industry? Why are you passionate about it? What is your strength? What in your background gave you that? Do you have extracurricular activities that you did that really gave you that leadership that we're looking for? And that, so it's really asking the right questions that are catered to not only the job and the experience and the person, but the intangibles that you're looking for as well. And there are specific questions that can pull that out.
Wow. You're right. It's not always the best person on paper or interviews the best. The local police department, they say they're now looking for the person who scores the best and answers the interview questions meticulously. They want the person that's going to vibe with them the best, that they can hang out with, that they know similar values, morals, that they're not going to try to arrest that person's mom. And it's somebody that they can really get along with. And especially as you're building out your team, right? That culture, that energy. You don't want somebody that's going to walk in the room and just all the air sucked out of the room.
Right. And we see that happen a lot too with producing advisors. So if a firm brings on another producing advisor because they're bringing portable AUM,
yes,
what happens is you really have to be so careful about the core values of that person, because a lot of times people will do it again out of desperation. Well, I just need my overhead so high. This is really going to help. And well, now you have somebody who doesn't believe in the accountability that you believe in, that doesn't want to work the way that all the other advisors that you're looking to hire do, doesn't like to be managed. And so it's really that you've got to really make sure that it's a yin and yang and not just the best thing for financials or the best thing on paper.
Yes. Oh, that I can just feel the energy, the conflicts happening already with it. For it. So what about, do you do a lot of work with matching up advisors for succession planning or buying out their books as well?
Yes, I do actually. I have 2 positions that I'm working on right now, and they're specifically for female advisors. So it's difficult, and the reason for that is that the advisor that they are taking over their practice and their book they're females, and that the majority of the clients that they work with are women and divorcees. And so I say that because it's every time I get on a call with a firm that's looking for a female advisor, it's like, hey, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. I'm not sure. And I'm like, well, it's a different type of, when you look at all the rules that are out there, you're not asking for somebody because you're not profiling. You're asking because of the diversity. You're asking because you need somebody that doesn't look like the rest of your team, or that is going to run the women's wealth division. And you can't really have a man run a women's wealth division, because women aren't going to be as comfortable talking to men as they would be to women, because we like the people we like, and we like to feel not judged, and to be able to say, hey, when my husband passed away, I had I didn't even put gas in my car. There are those stories that I hear so often. And so I don't know where we pay what, or what we pay for anything. And so a lot of times women are so embarrassed to talk to men about that. That's what I find on my end of it. And so we do a lot with succession planning. And the top two things we find is number one is when firms start looking for succession plans, it's usually too late.
Oh, again, too late.
Yeah, usually too late, because we're putting it off and we're putting it off. And then the other thing we find is that when firms say that they're looking for a succession plan, and they say it's going to be 3 to 5 years, that really means it's 7 to 10. And even then, that advisor may not ever actually retire. I think as business owners,
they never retire.
They don't ever retire. And so I think that's something just to put out there. And so I remember when I first started in this industry, I was so naive to that. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And we're going to have a succession plan, and you're going to be an equity owner, and you're going to have this and the opportunity to be the sole advisor with the firm. And I remember the team I worked with, alongside of an EVP of financial services, and all they did was producing advisors. And so I remember I'd come with them to this, I have a salaried position, it's going to be great. And they would laugh. They'd be like, that's so funny. And I'd be like, what do you mean? That's what they said, So I was so naive to it. But now that I've seen it happen, it's almost like, okay, so my first question to the firm that is the owner looking for the succession plan is, what is your plan? How often do you plan on staying after you are quote unquote retired? Because you're never going to actually ever retire. And they're like, yes, no, I will. No, you're not. So let's just talk about that. And if you do, let's just talk about on the other end case scenario, so that we can get ahead of it. But we get those a lot.
I remember one of my advisor friends, she took over her father's book, and she was leaving a salary position, really good job. And she was actually going to be taking less money. And in the contract, Jordan, she put, you need to retire in 1 year. She's like, and it needed to be immediate.
Yeah.
And she goes, that's the only way I was going to do it, because she knows, right? You can work and work and work and work. Mm-hmm. I know advisors who are in their 80s. I know advisors retired at 86 very easily. Right. Oh, that's interesting.
It becomes our identity. Our career becomes our identity. When you love what you do, it really becomes who you are. And it becomes very difficult to actually ever walk away from that, because outside of that, what are we? Who are we? And so a lot of people have trouble with that.
And be my dad. Yep. I can see him in his 70s. And by then your clients, their family, you talk with them all the time. You're used to it. Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, we spoke a little bit before we got onto the podcast. The difference between women and men hiring and running their firms. Mm-hmm. I would love to hear this, because I've seen, majority, was it 18% of advisors are women, majority are men. I'm sure there's polar opposites on how we manage, operate, hire, and things. Could we go into that?
I would love to. I would love to. So, yes. So the very first thing I always say is, when a woman is ready to hire, the first hire needs to be an operations manager. And that person will do all of the rest of the hiring, because...
Oh, amazing.
Yes. And the reason that I say that is a few things that we've touched on, right? Like, women are we're going to put it off. We're going to put it off. We're not going to be as intentional because we're putting it off. We're too busy. And the reality is, so I don't know if you're familiar with EOS. Are you familiar with that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So basically the whole concept is that for small businesses to grow, it's like the Bernhardt scaling up for small businesses, right? So in order for firms to grow, the visionary, which is traditionally the owner in this case, needs to have somebody that is actually executing and implementing operations. And part of that is because of to go from hiring into accountability and management. So I'm going to say something and a lot of people aren't going to love it, but it is just what I have found to be true. But traditional entrepreneurs are not good managers. They're not.
No, that makes sense. I mean, we're very creative. We're on that more like we see a problem, let's solve it, but then executing the business model behind it.
Right. And hear me out. We make amazing mentors. We love mentoring people because we're so passionate about what we do. We want other people to be passionate and to do the things that we do. So we make great mentors and we train on really amazing things, but we are not good managers. And
it actually makes me feel better about myself. It's not just me.
No, it's not just you. But what I find so commonly, the difference between men and women is that men in this industry that are entrepreneurs and visionaries and don't have their operations person in place, they don't make good managers because their expectations are high and they don't have the time or energy or emotions to deal with it. So they're like, you're not producing, you're not, these are the set expectations that you had, you're not up to par, goodbye. So there's more turnover. It's more, and I'm very like careful with the words, but it can be more of a toxic environment. If they don't,
I was going to say it seems more aggressive, hostile,
aggressive, yeah,
pressure.
And it's exactly, that's exactly why is because men are they're very career oriented, right? Naturally,
performance driven,
sports mentality. A lot of them had that growing up, like or coach mentality. So the men typically kind of embrace that type of management style. And so if they don't have an operations person to say, hey, go back to your office and you do you and you get back to work in the business, let me take care of the management and KPIs and holding somebody accountable, then it creates more of that toxic work environment that can become a obviously big culture issue. On the other side with women, because we're too emotional, we're overly emotional.
The torturers too.
We tend to hold on to bad hires because we feel bad. We should forgive the KPIs that are being missed because we understand they're busy. Like they had, Johnny was out sick for a week. And so she's still playing catch up. And so we have that heart that we lead with. And in management, it can get the best of us. So it's really finding somebody who embodies the operational and the love for building, the love for inspiring, the love for managing. So really having those set KPIs. One of the things that I love so much about EOS, a lot of the firms that I work with run on it. But what I love so much about it is it takes you through pretty much every key area that I've touched on is firm identity to start off with, and then talks a lot about immediate needs. And it really helps understand, it helps firm owners when they're looking at hiring, they're looking at management, who is that person reporting to? What KPIs are set? And at the end of the day, how often are they meeting with that manager to make sure that their KPIs are being met, right? And so it's kind of that, that yin to your yang. If you're ready to grow and you're ready to hire and you are a solo practitioner, the very first hire you need to make is an operations manager.
It's a lot off of your plate.
A lot.
So much. It's funny we were talking about this because last night our creative director, Alyssa, and I were going back and forth on the same thing. We're like, we know you have shit going on at home, but you also need to perform at work and balancing, being too aggressive and on it and giving them some space to be able to get through a family emergency or issue.
Right.
And while also making sure that they're getting their job done and hitting those performance indicators. And
Right. Yeah, because we tend to get busy too. So we're like, we have the empathy and then we're busy on top of it and they're not doing their jobs. Now we're doing it for them. So now you're creating a culture of individuals who don't have to perform, who don't have to hit their KPIs. And then you're so frustrated and you're so burnt out because you're like, why, like, what am I doing? Like, do I even want to do this anymore? This is exhausting. I'm just going to close my practice and go work for somebody else and not have to deal with any of the operations. I think we've all kind of hit that, right? Regardless of what the industry is, but specifically as female entrepreneurs, we let our emotions get the best of us on the other end of things. And that's why I always say when you're like, you were kind of just describing that wave feeling, like when you know when to make decisions, when not to make decisions. So that's what I always say is sit with it for a minute. Because when I talk to female entrepreneurs and firm owners, when we talk about, I can literally, when they say, well, what are the top 3 areas that, that you can identify as like, I shouldn't have made that. I should have made that hire, should have made that merge, should have hired that, shouldn't have onboarded that, whatever it is. And I can go through and say, what was happening in your life at this point? What was happening in your life at this point? And so we tend to try to band-aid things instead of actually getting down to the problem, because we put things off, we do things ourselves, and then we make decisions out of desperation.
Kind of like a healthy exercise to do.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
You can tell when something, I get dealt with, even with clients, when something must be happening at home because they're acting differently, their energy is different, their whole personality almost shifts. Like there's got to be some sort of drama. And then it comes out maybe the next meeting or the next few weeks. And then it happens with us too. Awesome, Jordan. So as we're wrapping up, I spent a lot of time with you. I feel like I could talk with you forever about these things as we're in it here at the Women's Health Boutique.
Yeah.
What's one thing, whether you're a female advisor or just a business owner, that you can do to kind of get that next growth phase going, whether it's a hire or investing into your team? This might be too big of a question for you, but what's a good step forward for women business owners, women advisors?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is take a step back. That as much as we hate to do it, you have to dedicate at least one day, minimally 1 day a month.
1 day a month.
Yes.
And ladies.
And if you're like, I can't dedicate it, I'm so busy, as much as it is unfortunate, make it a Saturday, make it a weekend, make it sometime that you don't have to take yourself out of the business, so you won't feel guilty about that. And something for your kids, so you don't feel guilty about that. And just take a day. I think it's really crucial to take 5 to 8 hours a month just on strategic planning. To if you don't have another team member at this point, an operations manager, check in with yourself. What are my goals? Where am I going? Because the only way you can grow is by being intentional and really understanding that. So I think the number one step that anybody, owners that need to take in order to grow, is to do the back end, to do the work we don't like to do, to roll up our sleeves and put on our operations hat, which we all love to do so much. But that's really what you have to do, is to define, to know, to get to where you want to go. You have to define what that is and the key steps to get there.
I love that. Schedule it. We'll have the best in session to it. Schedule it in your calendars right now, ladies. 1 day a month. And let's be honest, anything can wait 1 day.
Exactly.
Anything that you think you have to do that day, it can wait 1 day. Mm-hmm. That's an epiphany that hit me last year when we were so busy. We're in survival mode. And you're trying to figure out how you're getting all the things on the to-do list and all the emails, calls, and like, it can wait 24 hours.
Right.
It can. Take a deep breath. It will be there tomorrow.
Right.
Take those time, because then it'll give you more time back.
Right.
It's going to give you more time and energy.
80-20 rule, the 80-20 rule, right? So taking that, the 20% of time to be strategic is going to pay itself back tenfold, fourfold.
I love that.
They save you a lot of heartache for hiring the wrong person or managing incorrectly or not holding people accountable.
Yes. You definitely know what you're doing, Jordan. You brought so much to our show, Women Behind the Millions, because that's how we get to the billion. We need a team. We need to hire intentionally, strategically, the right people to have the right culture, the right energy in the room. So where can our viewers and listeners find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, Jordan Christa, and then also on our website. So it's www.riseuprecruiting.com.
Rise Up Recruiting. I love that name. Rise Up Recruiting. Everything gets leveled up here. So thank you so much, Jordan, for being on here. Thank you to all of our listeners, viewers, our supporters, our money queens. We'll see you on our next episode of Women Behind the Millions.